This is now the second Toyota Land Cruiser I have had. The 100 Series platform is known for its legendary reliability and off-road capability, and among that, it is a great on-road cruiser too. It's really the first in the Land Cruiser lineup that added comfort orientation to its lineup. And this particular one has been a bit of a bear ever since I've owned it. It of course needed a timing belt right away, which is to be expected. It's a general, standard 10-year maintenance item. But in addition to that, in my case, I had to do a brand new steering rack, which was extremely difficult. Then among that, I had the CV axle retract out of the steering knuckle. And that was because somebody reused the $5 circlip and they shouldn't have, so I had to buy whole new axle kits on both sides, brand new front CV axles, axle nuts, everything you could think of. And despite that ridiculous amount of work, time of work, money spent, it still has things that annoy me. First of all, the interior isn't perfect, but more importantly than that, it vibrates a lot when you're driving. It's not a steering wheel vibration. I pretty much solved that with the steering rack and brand new inner and outer tie rods, but it vibrates. It has a resonance. I've tried to record it and see if I can capture it, but it just doesn't quite come through on video in the same way. When you're driving, there's a whoa, whoa, like a cyclical vibration. And sometimes when you're sitting in drive at a standstill, you can feel vibrations through the whole chassis and the whole engine. And so in this video, what we're gonna try to tackle is the transmission mount, which is gonna be very easy to swap, and the engine mounts as kind of one step. The other part of this is going to be all of the front differential bushings. Well, I'm gonna try to treat these as two separate endeavors. I'm gonna do the front diff. I'm actually missing another arm. It hasn't arrived yet, but it should be here soon. So what we're gonna do is the front diff bushings. First of all, look at how roasted that one is. You can just see it's like crumbling and collapsing. It's just completely annihilated and it's all sticky. Ugh, it's all gooey, gross. So there's three that we have to do here, one on the front cover, and what Toyota wants you to do is replace this whole front cover, but I am not gonna do that. Then we also have this arm here, which will come soon. That one's gonna be relatively easy. And then we have a third, which I don't think we can quite access from this view right now. But there's another one in the back, and they're not terribly difficult to do. So those are what we're gonna do. For this front bushing, we're actually gonna have to kind of beat this out with a hammer, and then we'll have to go get a press tool to push that back in, but we'll worry about that later. As you know from the other videos here on my channel, I replaced all of the suspension components with OEM new parts on my 1997 Toyota Celsior. And that made a massive difference, but it blew me away how big of a difference the engine mounts and the transmission mounts made. So I really feel like that will be the case here. The Celsior had a lot less miles. It only had 80,000 miles. That of course was a couple years older. This Land Cruiser is a 2002. So, 5 years can definitely make a difference. But because of how big of a difference I think it's going to make and how massive these components are. I mean, this thing is as big as my head. Like, this is just the transmission mount. So there's just no way you can't tell me I'll see some kind of improvement. And here comes UPS for that final front diff arm. Let's go. Okay, long story short, there's the diff stuff. That's what we're gonna do first. Then we're gonna do engine and transmission mounts between that. We're gonna drive it, see how it feels. And that's enough blabbing, so let's go ahead and get started. I apologize for the addition of fan noise in the background, but it's summertime in Florida here. We can't do it without it. First up is this here, just a 19, so we'll go ahead and get this bolt out now that I have the jack supporting the diff too. So what we have to do now is just use a screwdriver and kind of wedge it in there, beat that between the front diff cover housing and the actual bushing itself. And the new one, the Toyota OEM one, is exactly the same. There is an orientation that's gonna kind of go like this. You can see how the center of that bushing is missing on both sides, and this is the one we're gonna replace it with. There is a little stamped steel washer that you need to reuse along with the bolt. And then this up here is a semi-metal, semi-rubber bushing that I do have that also needs to be replaced as well. So after beating on it for what feels like a lifetime, this is finally out. It takes, basically just gotta smash it all the way around. And then eventually I was able to just kind of loosen it enough to sort of wiggle it out back and forth, back and forth. There are definitely some cracks inside of here. You can see all along that interior edge, and there's a pretty big one up there. It moves a whole lot more on the car. Like, I mean, I can definitely move that with my fingers, and this one is, oh, well, no, it's pretty similar. So I'm not exactly convinced this front one alone will fix the kind of shimmy and vibration that I'm experiencing. I've heard that one there, that rearmost one, will contribute more significantly. So we're gonna keep going. I'm gonna leave that one off because I have to go rent a ball joint press, or bushing press to push this back in. But I wanted to get this out because that's definitely the hardest part. So we'll go ahead and get those other two arms on and see how that goes. Those are gonna be easy. Well, don't get ahead of yourself, Jonathan. We'll see. Bought this fancy light, and next up is this arm here. So there's some 19s right there, there, and there. and we'll go ahead and get that one swapped out while it's jacked up and easy to reposition. Then we'll move to the rearmost one, which you can see one of the bolts is there, the other one is there, and there's one like kind of further up behind the diff. I paid like 25 bucks for this impact rated wobble socket, and it seemed really expensive at the time, but it's so useful. Spoke too soon. Gotta break out just the old breaker bar. Yeah, oh my God, those are unbelievably tight. Of course there's a nut on the other side. Why wouldn't there be? Okay, so that arm is now out, and if we look at these side by side, you can see that there's daylight poking through on the underside of that bushing, and it's tweaked. You can see it's not centered. And then of course this one, no daylight peeking through, and it's perfectly centered. So this bushing might make a pretty big difference. This bushing I can move just a little bit with my fingers, and that one not at all. If I stick something in it, I can get a lot more pry, and this one has a little bit, but it's definitely gonna make a good impact, I'm sure. And last but not least, the rear arm is off. This one doesn't look too bad, although this bushing is absolutely rock solid. It kind of seems like it collapsed in on itself a bit because that side you can kind of see through a little bit. One side's closed, so maybe that's just how it's supposed to be, but this thing is just 100% rock solid. This bolt also had quite a bit of white colored corrosion on it and a bit of rust down there, as you can see. I think oil was kind of seeping in there, maybe setting in there, bringing water and contaminants in, and I had to bust out the breaker bar with the jack handle on it to get it done, because there was just no way you were gonna get it otherwise. It took all my might, and when I finally broke it loose, it went pow and kind of, you know, broke free the corrosion. So all of these should do pretty good for the ride quality. Next up on the list is the ball joint press kit. So we've used these before on the channel many a times, as I imagine you probably have too. Of course, they don't open one-handed, which is delightful. There we go. So we need this to push in the new one in the front, that one we were working on earlier. And when we do that, that should allow us to then start putting everything else back in. I'm not going to put this one or this new one back in just yet because we need the diff to droop down quite a bit. So this part of the bushing press can go up above the differential in between the subframe and the diff, and then we just squeeze it together. So let's get to stepping. Wow, this is turning out to be way more difficult than it looks. So I had to take that arm back off, one of the 3 bolts in the backmost arm off, the long one, and then I had to pry this down to fit the tool in there, and now we should be able to kind of set it up to push the bushing in. But oh man, it's just always something with this stuff, dude. This is not an easy car to work on. All right, here's my press setup. You probably realized in that last shot I had to take this back off, put the screw in, pull the diff back down with my pry bar, and then there's the bushing, and I just found a random metal cup like I used to press in other bushings on the LS400, aka Celsior. And online people just basically push with something flat right on the bottom of the bushing, even though there's rubber, kind of compresses the rubber, but not a very hard push. It's not a super deep press fit, so we're gonna go ahead and send this and see if it works. Now that's what I call a mega super ultra success. Bushing is pressed in, ready to live a good life in its new home, correctly aligned, and now we can put all of our other arms in and be done. Done with the front diff, that is. OMG's, I almost forgot the new diff cushion. Oh, that would have been horrible. Just gotta pry it down, slide this in over the top, that little nub that you can see coming through there. We'll just meet right in the bottom of that, and then that'll be set. 4 hours and complete darkness later, we are done with the front diff bushings. Got that new arm, this one, and the rear one installed. Was it worth it? Boy, I hope so. I'm interested to see how this feels with just the front diff bushings done. Then we'll do the transmission mount. This one actually doesn't look terribly difficult, but there's a full cross member I need to remove because otherwise I'm not gonna be able to get these studs pulled out of the cross member. I'm too exhausted for that tonight, so we'll kind of do this in stages, which will be more interesting, I think. So after that 4 hours of work last night, I am really happy to report that it definitely made a big difference in terms of just the tightness of the front end. It doesn't feel so loosey-goosey anymore. Nowhere near as bad, you know, before as it was when the steering rack was going out. And but there's definitely a noticeable difference with those front differential bushings done. It's cut down a little bit on the vibration, but the motor mounts and the transmission mounts I think will make a big difference. I'll do those another day. But there's some huge news in the fleet that I'm super excited to share, and so we're gonna end the video here and pick up in the next one. And this is the super exciting news. I've been on the hunt for an LS430 for months now. I sold the Celsior with the intent to find one with very specific criteria. It needed black exterior, it needed to be decent on the inside, which this one absolutely is, and it needed work. And I wanted it to have some kind of something broken with it mechanically, not body or interior, but it needed a mechanical issue, and this one fits the criteria. This one has transmission problems, which is awesome. I might be the only person that's stoked to have transmission problems on their new car, but here we are. So you know the drill on my channel. We're not just gonna fix the transmission, we're gonna make the suspension perfect. The interior doesn't need much, so if you're interested in following along, check out the next video here on the channel, and we're gonna pick back up on the 100 series motor mounts and transmission mounts in another video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.